Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Have you ever wondered who you would be if nothing bad had ever happened to you? If you'd never lost anyone or anything, or if you've never seen any dream shattered? If no one had ever made you feel like you were not enough? Taught your limitations, told you what you couldn't be or could be? If no one had ever broken your heart, betrayed your trust, or done any of the thousands of big and small things we humans do to one another and to ourselves? Who would we be if you got to say everything you've ever left unsaid? If you could put your past in the past and truly forgive yourself and others? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be in this magical, magnanimous, magnificent, majestic, marvelous, metaphysical, miraculous, mind-awakening, mind-boggling, and mind-blowing planet of ours. This is Inspired Living Radio. I'm your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, and I was just reading a little bit of what we're going to be exploring today in prospecting on Unfinished Business with Melanie Smith. This is 8 steps to heal your trauma, transcend your past, and transform your life. And I just want to say it's going to be an inspiring show. It's a great read. I've read through it, and we're going to discuss over the next hour about unfinished business. So I do want to say real quick, I just want to say thank you for joining us here yet for another soul adventure, an inspiring episode to explore, discuss, and discover the many diamonds within each and every one of us and the many diamonds in our world that have yet to be revealed. So get comfortable, grab your favorite drink, kick back, sit back, or lie back. Take in a nice, deep, healing, peaceful, and cleansing breath. And let's just prospect together as we discuss today's show topic, which is unfinished business. So I want to give a big shout out and say thank you to all of our inspired listeners from around the globe, the universe, and beyond. My team and I here at Inspired Living Radio are always so humbled, honored, grateful for you for listening to the show, whether it's live or downloading it on one of your favorite podcasting platforms, subscribing, leave a review. That's always important. And because you've done your reviews and downloads, you've made Inspired Living voted a best inspirational podcast to listen to and follow the last 3 years running. So we do appreciate you. If you've not yet subscribed, liked, or followed the show, there's always time to do so over on our main social media platforms over at Facebook. Just look for Inspired Living Radio and Podcast. That's our global community with listeners all around the globe. You can also follow us at Instagram and Twitter. Just look for the handle Inspired For Us. That's the number 4, Inspired For Us. And of course, over on our YouTube channel, Inspired Living Radio. And we are now streaming through Audible, and you can actually just open up your favorite podcast show and just say, Alexa, open up Inspired Living Podcast, and it will pull up the latest episode, including this one of Unfinished Business. So I always like to say, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within. Are we ready to go prospecting? I know that I am, and I'm looking forward to today's show. And as we always like to say, you are the inspired and the inspiration, so let's be inspired, let's inspire others, and let's inspire before we expire. So before I bring Melanie on, I just want to give a little bit of background. You can go to our social media sites that have all has this listed as well to get to the book, to get to Melanie's website. So Melanie Smith has worked in the field of heartbreak, grief, trauma, transition, loss, change, renovation, and all things unfinished business for over 2 decades, and she has helped thousands of people change their lives profoundly. So just a wonderful guest to have on Inspired Living Radio already. She started her career as a platinum-selling international songwriter and award-winning actress, starring and co-starring in shows such as The World Turns. I'll admit, I've watched the show with my sisters growing up, so don't tell anybody. Melrose Place, another show that I watched. A huge Seinfeld fan. Curb Your Enthusiasm right there. And Deep Space Nine for all you Trekkies out there, as well as The Division, just to name a few. As an entrepreneur, her award-winning lifestyle, wellness and yoga center was considered to be one of the most well-respected in the country by sources such as Vogue, Yoga Journal, Philadelphia Magazine, and others. Now a powerful motivational speaker, writer, and leader, Melanie has been a contributing writer for many national health and wellness magazines and holds the distinction of being a PCC level ICF certified coach and an ICI master level coach. She is a proud mother of one grown son, Gideon, born and raised in Scranton, Pennsylvania. She presently splits her time between New Hope, Pennsylvania, and Naples, Florida. Again, today we are going to talk with Melanie about her new book, Unfinished Business, as I'm holding it here in my hand, 8 Steps to Heal Your Trauma, Transcend Your Past, and Transform Your Life. And with that, without further ado, Melanie Smith, welcome to Inspired Living Radio.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Well, thank you for being here. I need something, Chris. We need to have my producer. We need to have where you have like a hand clapping, sound where we can all clap and be like, "Yay, welcome to the show." So,
or you can do the Seinfeld "badung-gung" kind of sound.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited for today's show. Again, I can resonate with many of those series that you've been on, and like I said, I grew up watching some of the soap operas with my sisters, which I'm sure they're going to get a kick out of when they hear this show. But thank you for coming on and sharing this information and sharing this wisdom and knowledge. I think there's a lot of people out there that are suffering from, myself included, the past of our traumas, how to get past our past, how to transform our life. And so I just read a little bit of the introduction of the book, but just tell us a little bit about yourself, about the book, how you came to write this, and let's just get inspired.
Absolutely. I talk a lot about myself in the book, and it's not to be self-absorbed in any way. I talk about my trauma throughout my life because I think it's really important, first and foremost, that my readers feel close to me because it's a vulnerable subject. And I think as any path we travel, right, and we're all journeymen on these paths, we want somebody who has absolutely been up that mountain, right? I used to make a joke to my friends, and I would say, you can't go see a family therapist that doesn't have a family or a child therapist that doesn't have children, right? So I have been through tremendous amounts of trauma, heartbreak, and grief in my life, which actually taught me that it was a curriculum for me, that if I used my life and myself almost as an alchemical laboratory, I could help others. And, as my father used to say all the time, nothing ever goes to waste, right? All of my experience has now become, and I write this in the poem at the front of the book, gems on my path. And so that is really how I came up with this work to begin with, because I was born ill. I had major surgery by the time I was 11 months old. I had an ill mother that had suffered many strokes. I found her. I had a father that was ill. I lost my mother at a young age. Then my sister was killed in a tragic car accident. I went through a divorce. I went through financial restructuring, et cetera, et cetera. And when I started studying grief, loss, trauma, and we'll get into trauma and how it is similar to and bleeds into grief and loss and heartbreak, and they bleed back to trauma. In studying these things, I started recognizing that there was a community that had beliefs around those issues that I didn't find accurate. So whether it was in deep meditation, whether it was in my yoga practice, or whether it was with my studies with some of the most gifted and informed teachers in the world, I started understanding that my intuition was correct. And that's in the development of my system, or the intellectual property that's in this book. I started trying it in my practice, and it had anecdotal results that showed that it truly worked, and it was truly changing people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I opened the book, I loved it right away from the poem. And do you mind if I just read it for our listeners? Just
Oh,
so
no,
they can get
of course, of course.
Okay. Because, as the Intuitive Prospector, I'm all about, prospecting for all those polished gems that you talked about. But this is when you open the book, it says, I no longer look at heartbreak through the eyes of the wounded. Each loss, every change, all transitions are now a trail of gems, polished stones on the path toward my highest potential. They are sacred reminders of my purpose, my wisdom, and my promise to carry them forward as a gift for others. My resilience and courage are the map. Each different negotiation, the terrain, now there is nothing I cannot recover from. There are only things that I have yet to uncover and understand, disguised as goodbyes I have not been willing to say. Melanie Smith, 2018. So when I read that, I was like, because I teach on the diamond within, and a diamond is only created under extreme pressures, right?
That's right.
And everybody has that diamond within. And I always say the shakening, I know for a big part of the work I do today, even including this platform and this radio show and this podcast, is because of the grief and the trauma and the shakening that caused my awakening to look at life differently. And so I opened this, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good read. Because I read about a book a week with all the different, guests we have here and the books that come to us. And I was like, oh, yep, this is right in line with what we're trying to do, because it is about that polished gem to reveal that diamond within. And so when you came up with the title of this book, Unfinished Business,
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Because it comes from somewhere, right? And so for our listeners, you're doing a book and then you're like, shoot, what do I call this book? Right?
Yes, yeah. And it's funny because in a way it downloaded to me, but my original training as a coach was in the Gestalt method. And in the Gestalt method, we talk a lot about unfinished business. And all of us have unexpressed emotions and thoughts that relate to an incident from the past. And I mean, I don't know anybody in life that doesn't have a recurring thought or a phantom argument or doesn't get charged up when something is occurring, and maybe they don't even know why. And this all comes from unfinished business. But what I also loved about the title was it didn't cherry pick. It wasn't like trauma and heartbreak around divorce, trauma and heartbreak around unsettled family relationships. It was all unfinished business. And because every one of us has a deep, deep nature that searches for what's called gestalts, or organized wholes, completion, because of that deep need, unfinished business becomes very exhausting, and to the entire energy system and to the nervous system. And what else it does is it blocks future success and development. It doesn't allow us to make full progress and to reach our highest potential, because we really are on an emotional leash, right? Have you ever had that occur where you're like, okay, I'm over that. And you feel like you go a distance, and then all of a sudden there's almost like a snapback, or you draw the same relationship into your life, or you have the same form of rejection or heartache. That is a sign that unfinished business is showing up in the present. So it was like,
powerful.
Wow. I remember just sitting there as I was writing and going like, because a lot of my clients said, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? I want to give this to my mother. I want to give this to my boyfriend. I want to give this to my husband. And, you go through a lot. And I was teaching a webinar on this work, and it was called Unbreak Your Heart or something like that. And it never felt quite right. Mm-hmm. It was sweet, but it never felt quite right. And then one day I was sitting there and I was like, just unfinished business. That's what this is about. Mm-hmm. That's how it happens.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. I'm going to challenge you a little bit here, because you said you downloaded, and from our listeners, that language, that lingo might be, well, where did she download that from? Did she get on a computer? Did it come from somewhere else? Because
really good point.
Yeah, we've talked about this in past episodes. I personally believe that all the information that we want to access is there in our consciousness. It's there in our thoughts, in our beliefs. And when you download something in technology terms, it's interesting that we use the term today for computers, but we've been downloading for centuries, for millennia. And so I'm just curious what your download felt like, looked like, where you think it came from, and just share with our listeners what the download was like.
Well, it's such a great question. I was actually talking about this today. I think it was Ben Franklin that used to say when he had a question, he would ask the question, he'd put it out into the universe, and then he would sit down and meditate, but he'd hold a number 2 pencil in his hand. Because sometimes he would fall asleep, and right between where he would enter the deepest part of his meditation and potentially fall asleep, the answer would come. The download would come. So he kept the pencil in his hand, because if he got to the point where he was going to fall asleep, it would fall and wake him up. And he would always find inevitably the answer that was downloading into his system. That's the download that I'm referring to. It's an opening of clarity. It's a sense of certainty. It's a sweet spot of information that and by the way, a lot of this book was a download. Right? A lot of this book, I would sit 6 to 8 hours every day writing this book, it's not my nature. So right there, the energy was downloaded, right? And the focus was downloaded. But a lot of the information and the clarity and the structuring came from a sense of downloading. But the title was crisp and clear, like a diamond. Right, I love that you use the purest stone, right? Like a diamond. Yeah. It just had a glimmer and a glitter to it that I went, oh. And then I never wavered from it. It wasn't like some of the other titles I came up with. The next day I woke up and that's not right. This was, yeah, that's it. And it's funny because since the book has come out, I've gotten so many messages and so many DMs, etc., about, oh my God, great title. I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's because just the word unfinished pulls at our gut. Business, maybe, but the unfinished pulls at our gut. We know when something is still active in us. Just like a virus, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We know. So thank you for that, because sometimes we use energetic or spiritual lingo, and it's really important that people who are listening and learning from us know exactly, because they might have said, oh, she Googled it and then she downloaded it. No, that's not what I did.
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up, because when we talk here on Inspired Living, we talk about the downloads, and I love that you used the reference to Benjamin Franklin. I actually read his autobiography, and that's one point I did not know. But it's so right. You get a lot of information right in that gap when you're about to fall asleep, and right where you're thinking about. And I always for my students that are listening, I always remind them to ask, believe, take a deep breath, because breath is important, receive and perceive. And, you've got to set that intention, because intention, there's a lot of energy that follows that. So writing this book, coming up with the title, but then also trusting. You have to trust to that feeling like, unfinished business just feels right to me, and trusting that, because you can get a lot of different thoughts just with your own worst enemy, right? We're our own worst enemy. Is that is that what I'm trying to say? And then of course, other, pundits and experts will, weigh in. And so, you got, Cindy Crawford to, on the front of the book to, a prescriptive, compassionate, and user-friendly guidebook for the heart, infused with a hard-won wisdom and true concern for the emotional health and authentic well-being for all of us. So, it's pretty cool that you got Cindy Crawford, who I grew up with, to be on the cover of the book as well. But I also want to focus on the 8 steps to heal your trauma, because 8 is such a very powerful number in numerology. We've talked about that in previous episodes, because 8 is the power of manifesting. 8 is the infinity symbol. So I'm curious if there was any influence to the 8 steps versus 5 step, 6 step, 10 step. Is there any influence on the 8 steps?
Absolutely, because look, you even look at the cover, and what you're looking at on the cover is a shattered energy system. And out of it emerges a mandala, which is the symbol for union and wholeness. So when I say the shattered energy system, I am speaking of the chakras. When you really, now, there are different philosophies around the chakras. There are philosophies that have millions of chakras, but the one that we really do understand in the Western culture typically has 7, but the 8th is, of course, universal, right? It's the divine. And so it is in alignment with the chakras. Originally, I had at the top of every chapter a reference to what chakra and where it shows up in the body, what organs, and then I was like, well, my readers' heads are going to explode. and I took it out because that's a book unto itself, right? Like you can't like just sort of tip your hat at the chakras. It's just too powerful. So yes, there is absolutely an energetic connection to all of what you said in it with the number 8, where it came into play. And again, that's a little bit of a hint to my readers that do study the chakra system, that if you can bring that data as you're reading and doing the work in the book, as we go from step 1 to 8, knowing, well, that makes sense because it does align with the root, et cetera, right? The other thing that I did want to say, Marc, that's so great when you were talking about how the brain gets in the way and how you ask listeners to sort of address that. I do talk a lot in the book about the 3 brains theory, and I don't mean the triune brain. I mean the 3 brains, which means the head, which I call the royal brain, which has, I believe, 80 million neurons and an intrinsic nervous system. The heart has 40,000 neurons, and the gut has 100 million neurons. All have intrinsic nervous systems. Now, science knows that those are the things that something needs to actually define it as a brain. But isn't it interesting that the gut itself has more neurons than the brain, right? So we are so educated around, how smart the royal brain is, the thinking brain. But actually, when we talk for a moment about what Benjamin Franklin was doing, he was asking his being to get past the intellectual brain. He was opening up to something greater and allowing the heart and the gut to get involved, allowing his entire intelligence to inform the information he was searching for. And that's one of the things that I ask you to do in this book is you don't want to only think with the royal brain. You want to open up the heart brain and what I call the real brain, relationships, emotion, affection, and love, and the root brain, which was the original unfurling of our intelligence. So being able to access that layer of information, and as a coach, that is, I think, one of the things that makes me a master coach and gifted at coaching is I'm listening with all my brains. I'm experiencing you as you exist on this planet from every realm so that I get the full sense of data is what you're transferring to me. So I can not only reflect that back to you, but I get information that just the alchemy of us being together gives us and gives me so that I can mirror that for you. So that is really a beautiful thing that you do with your listeners and your clients, et cetera, is asking them to show up as a whole, as a gestalt.
I love that. Many diamonds right there. So, being in that present moment and sharing, because we always say, trust your gut. You always hear that. And people are like, well, why am I going to trust my stomach? Why am I going down to my stomach, right? But from a spiritual standpoint and from a scientific standpoint, if you think about it, it's where you came into incarnate through the umbilica, through that region of the stomach, right? That's your portal, if you think about it, of how you came to be. And I love it when they say, trust your gut, because I know for my journey that I've got a little troll that lives up in my regular brain called the ego, and I know that the little
There you
troll
go.
of ego doesn't live down in my intuition and my gut of where my energy flows. So yeah, I love that three brain aspect. And I think right now, just given the time, we're going to go to break just a little bit early because I want to get back and I want to discuss, because I have so many questions for you, Melanie, that I want to get to.
Great.
And this hour goes by so quick. So we're gonna take a quick 2-minute break, and when we come back, we're gonna pick up and really get into the details of this wonderful book called Unfinished Business: 8 Steps to Heal Your Trauma, Transcend Your Past, and Transform Your Life, with our special guest today, Melanie Smith. So stick around. We'll be right back in just a few minutes here on Inspired Living Radio.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
One planet, 7.3 billion people. Only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing
a job and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the universe is transformation, life is opinion. Welcome back to Inspired Living. Today's special guest, Melanie Smith, talking about her book, Unfinished Business: 8 Steps to Heal Your Trauma, Transcend Your Past, and Transform Your Life. Melanie, welcome back. I'm glad we went to the break early so we could get back and just dive into more diamonds that you were just sharing, and really get to some of the questions I have for you that I know that our listeners are going to be asking me after the show. I get a lot of questions after the show. Hey, you should have asked this, or you get a lot of those direct messages. And I'm like, that was a great question. Why did you send that before the show? So how do we know? So one of the things that I like to ask from your perspective and your opinion, what is the difference between grief and mourning?
That's a really beautiful question, because in my definition, grief is a constellation So grief has a conflict to it. Grief is something that is incomplete, and it hasn't actually found its settling. So, for example, if you lost somebody who was ill that you've been taking care of, right? And part of you says, thank God, they're out of their pain, they're moving, but then the other into something greater. But then the other part of you goes, well, what do I do? And where's that relationship? And where is the love I get to share with them? So it's this flange of emotion that is discordant, and starting to reconcile where the issue is in the healing. This is so critical. You don't go to a doctor and say, well, I'm just not feeling good. And they say, well, where? I don't know. It's just, somewhere around my head or somewhere around my heart. You want to be specific. Grief is a call for the specificity of your loss. What did I lose? What am I in pain around? Where is my sorrow? Mourning is the flow of emotion that moves through you that requires freedom of expression. So if I had a client once call me and they said, I just left the cemetery and a Donna Summer song came on the radio and I started dancing. And I got so angry with myself because I'm in mourning. And I said, but mourning has a life of its own. Yep. Allow the flow of the mourning. So when that universe opened up a minute to give you some freedom of breath, so you could remind yourself why there's a joy in living, let that happen. And when the mourning reappears, allow that to happen. So again, going back to the way we function as humans, we have ideas as opposed to allowing the experience to have a breath of its own. So for me, when I talk about mourning, it's actually the flow of energy that moves through you, and not stopping the mourning or controlling the mourning means that the natural flow of the experience of loss moves through you. Grief are the inconsistent emotions that you have not yet delved into deep enough to understand where the tendrils, or what I talk about, what the constellation is made of. Did that land? Does that make sense? Was I clear?
That was check, and check. I wanted to get your perspective because I knew that you were going to nail this. Because when I had my own journey, I didn't understand. And for our listeners out there, they may not understand that grief that you're feeling is more of that internal process that you were just referring to. And when the mourning takes place, that's more of that external process to allow yourself to dance to a Donna Summer song, to look for the signs, the symbols, the synergy, and the synchronistic events that our loved ones are only ever a thought away. And they can be, representative in so many different ways, from songs to movies to poems to books. And so it's just a reminder to honor your grief, because there are going to be trigger moments. Time is not relative when it comes to grief, trauma, and mourning. You can have that trigger moment that takes you back. My brothers have been in the spirit world for well over 20 years, and there's certain moments in my journey that I snap right back and feel that sadness and feel that grief and that trauma. And it's like, okay, I got to honor my grief and move forward through the power of mourning. So well done. Excellent response. And I just wanted to get your perspective because I knew that you'd have a diamond to share there. So how do we know if we're suffering from unfinished business as we bring the book back into this?
That's such a great question, because oftentimes I'll sit with my clients and they'll say, I just keep repeating old patterns, unfinished business, right? I have anxiety. I have depression. That's typically an overcharge or an undercharged reaction to unfinished business. I have this inability to stop thinking about the past. Or anybody know what phantom arguments are, or phantom conversations? You're in the car. I should have said that. And you have these arguments in your head, or you have these conversations in your head as if someone's there with you and they're not. Unfinished business. Overreaction, right? You're in an argument with your spouse, your significant other, your mother, and you storm out of the room. But you're not storming out of the room. You're storming out of your past, right? If it's hysterical, it's historical. Your inability to feel recovered or healed, your inability to make decisions, cloudy judgment, you feel like you're in some kind of an emotional or even spiritual leash, right? You cannot seem to fulfill your potential. You suffer with laziness, procrastination. Maybe you have imposter syndrome. But really, the simplest way to put it is if at any moment of your day or even your sleep, you find your past is making an enormous imprint on your present. You see, because when we activate unfinished business, we don't remember, we react. So if our body gets charged up in a moment, our mind doesn't say, yeah, this is a reaction. Remember when your sister stole the most important toy or the most important event of your life and ruined it for you, and you were embarrassed and humiliated, and you actually were so overwhelmed you had no ability to respond or react? Yeah, that's what this is from. So take a minute and catch your breath. The brain doesn't do that. The brain only reacts. It does not remember. So when you're in a moment and all of a sudden you feel this surge of energy go through your body, or you get a searing hot thought, I call them. You get these hot thoughts and you cannot come back to the moment. That is unfinished business.
And I love how I actually wrote it down. If it's hysterical, it's historical. Wow.
It's historical. Yes.
That's I'm definitely going to add that to my toolbox of sayings, because I have a ton of sayings that reminds me every day of the journey. You know, the lesson repeats until it completes. What we resist persists, right? Those type of mantras to be like, okay, how do we move forward, and how do my listeners? How do you get out of this wheel? You know, that's in spirituality we talk about the spiral, because things repeat and come back to us. And it's like, okay, it's never a straight linear path, right? The path is never straight and narrow. So, as you were writing this book, Melanie, for you, why is it so important to you to have this information and this knowledge? As I'm holding it here in my fingertips, why is it so important to you?
Okay, well, I'm going to go for the overall global feeling, which is if everyone on this planet completed their unfinished business and healed, we would actually have peace. Because unfinished business drives us down paths that don't even belong to us. So when you see people that, you know, we've talked for momentarily, we've talked for a moment about being held back, right? But let's also speak about people who are almost pathological overachievers. People that can never have enough. People that are destructive because they can never have enough. That too is unfinished business. If I just have more, I'll love myself. If I am just in charge of everyone and I have power, I will be able to exist in a place of peace. And none of that is true because you're looking in the wrong spot. You're not looking where, you know, I always say to my clients, not what's the problem, or I say, what's the pain? Where, when you go down the tendril of whether it's the under or the over, when you follow that artery down, where is the pain? That is the greatest question we can ask ourselves. What am I running from? What am I running towards? Because that is unfinished business. We are trying to be in the room with the people at that time, in that circumstance, to hit a bullseye on a target that we will never see again.
Yep. And that
I'm trying to help
right?
people. Well, it doesn't even exist anymore. You can't go back. So that's what this book does. It actually helps you find those places, those people, those experiences, so that you can get back into the energy that you were in and finally complete it. Now, this is science. We know through Peter Levine's work and Bessel van der Kolk, etc., who were both my teachers, we know this is science now. It's trapped in our physiology. Mm-hmm. It is trying to complete. It's the way the subconscious works. Did that answer the
Yeah,
question?
it does. I'm letting some pause there just so our listeners can let that sink in and, retain that information that's being shared right now. Cause I think that's important just, instead of filling it up with words,
Absolutely.
think about that. And in the book, when I was reading through this book, towards the end of the book, you talk about the higher self-talk. And you talk about, which I think is a big part of the journey that I too have had to go through, is to forgive. And you talk about, to get on with your life, you need to understand, forgive, and get to the other side. Because unforgiveness in my journey keeps them in control. And moving through forgiveness for self, forgiveness for others, is a big important part of working through this unfinished business, like the book talks about. And it's which is exactly what you've done over these, last few weeks that you talk about in the book. And bravo for showing up for yourself, your heart, and your future. And the pain, I love how you say, what is your pain? Because there are different pains, right? There's the body that we feel in the pain, the body pain. We have the emotional pain of, of feeling like maybe we're sore, or depressed, or anxiety. There's also the mental pain, the self-sabotage. So kind of going back to what you talked about, the three brains, I do believe that there's many different pains that we have to work through, and awareness is a big part of that. Awareness is the greatest agent for change that Eckhart Tolle teaches on, and for you've gone through a lot. You talk about this. You use heartbreak, you use trauma, loss, grief, and why do you feel that they are almost interchangeable, or why they're similar? Because some of the most inspiring guests that I've had on this show over the 8 seasons we've been on is people that have suffered so severely, so great, that they just find a way to survive and move forward and then inspire others. So for you, using your journey, your soul adventure, if you will, to share with us in the book, the heartbreak, the loss of your mom, just all those different, experiences, why is that similar?
Well, it is an amalgam. And one of the reasons I use them like an amalgam is, and I talk about this in the book, it's almost like tangled necklaces. They're not the same, but they are intrinsically tied and inextricably tied. So as we parse them out and pull them apart from one another, we recognize that there's no way that we're not experiencing on some level all of them at the same time. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about quickly when it comes to trauma is we used to believe that trauma was the event. That event isn't big enough to call it a trauma. But the truth of the matter is we now understand that trauma is what happens inside of you because of an event, that no one can decide whether or not it's a trauma except for the person who is traumatized. Meaning, if you feel consistently a sense of overwhelm, that you cannot move into action, that is a signal that trauma is active in the system. Now, we used to say men who came back from war, of course that's trauma, but not all men were traumatized, right?
Correct.
So we can't lay it on the event. We see the children in school shootings. Some of them were traumatized. Some of them were not. Some of them were sad. Some of them were impacted, but not necessarily traumatized. So we have to understand that they're close bedfellows. And oftentimes we'll say, here's a great example. We normalize a lot of things that are traumatizing. Divorce is a great example of that. Oh, everybody's getting divorced. What's the big deal? Well, in that circumstance, if somebody lived their whole life, their biggest dream was to have a family that stayed united, and they were betrayed and walked out on and traumatized by it, for somebody to say, what's the big deal? That is an example of re-traumatizing, shaming someone, because they don't understand that normalizing is not the same as healing. We have to go down into the tendrils of our loss. What did we lose? Why was it so painful? What is our belief around it? Why do we believe that? Who did that come from? So in the work we do to recover from heartbreak, loss, trauma, grief, we get such an intimate understanding of ourself and our soul that we start to bring the shattered and fragmented parts of ourselves that are out there in the universe scattered back home. We become whole again.
We become whole again. Very well said. And I'm thinking as you're talking about the school shootings, that's something that we've normalized. And, going back, I can remember when Columbine first happened, and here we are 20 plus years later, and we've really normalized, school shootings. And, what's the big deal? And it's in the media every day. And it's just like, yeah, that re-traumatizing, aspect. And so, very well said. So thank you for sharing that with us.
And also, Mark, even putting our children through drills to be prepared for school shooters is traumatizing. Could you imagine when we were children, somebody saying, oh, yeah, by the way, someone might walk in here with a gun and kill all of you. So, let's get ready for that. That's traumatizing. And we've normalized it. And we wonder why now we have an increase in children who have a new syndrome called school avoidance.
Yeah, that anticipation drives anxiety, uncertainty, which leads to a whole slew. That's a whole nother show, right? But you're right. It's I can't even imagine growing up when I was in school. I mean, the worst case scenario was you're going to go have a fist fight with Johnny. That was the biggest, news of my time going through school. And I know that you could relate as well. School shootings wasn't even a thing, but it's a great example of what's been normalized in our society and how we're not moving forward. And that's going to be some unfinished business that's going to be going on for this next, I'd say century. This is going to have ripple effects. So just for the sake of time, I told you, Melanie, this hour goes by really quick. So let me get to a few more questions here because we're having fun here on Inspired Living. And that's why I love doing this, because I love to talk to new people and be inspired and inspire others, right? So what is the main takeaway that you hope that readers will get from this book?
First of all, I want everyone to know that true healing and completion is possible. Grief, loss, trauma, heartbreak, there's this cultural belief like you just have to live with it. You'll never get over it. And that isn't true. It is not easy work to get over it, but it is simple work. You see, why isn't it easy? Because you have to start becoming a deep truth teller to yourself about things. And you have to go into the crevices and the cracks and really, really look at your story and your history, right? So it's challenging work, but it's simple. 8 steps, in some ways, 1, 2, buckle my shoe. Do what is required and you will feel different. So I think my biggest takeaway is we can all heal on a very deep level. And we will also come away knowing ourselves on a whole different level.
And who do you feel would benefit from this book?
Well, it's funny when they start asking, how they do this about, who's your audience? And you can't say everyone on the planet, but I want to say everyone on the planet.
8 billion people.
Look, let's look at what we just went through with COVID.
Right.
Our way of life has changed. We have all experienced a level of traumatic change. Right? And every time somebody says COVID, we all go, well, what are we supposed to do with that? Right? Life has changed. Work has changed. Events have changed. Gatherings have changed. Real estate has changed. So, but if I were really to be specific, I would say anyone that is still feeling weighed down, not capable of living the life they're to their highest potential. Anyone who wakes up feeling a sense of anxiety or overwhelm or depression, inability to make decisions or to move forward, that is a sign that this book is for you. If you want your best life and it is not showing up, if the within is not the without, or for those of you who study yoga, the Satchitananda. If the within is not the without, you are dealing with a lack of progress that needs to be examined, and that is unfinished business. You need this book.
Yeah, and it's, we are going through transformative times. It kind of, as you were saying that, the quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer comes to my mind, that transformation literally means going beyond your form. And we've all been forced from this global pandemic and COVID-19 to move past our form of what we've known and where we're going. And, I've always said the Roaring 20s would be looked at as a decade of great transformation. And I know Deepak even talked about the only way that global transformation can take place, it's usually preceded by great global chaos. And so there's a lot of unfinished business that we're working through. And, just for the sake of time, do you plan on writing any follow-up books or additional books?
I am going to be creating a program for people to learn this work so that they can take it either into their coaching practice, into their yoga schools, into even just independently into their families. So that will be one thing that will come out of this book, is I will start teaching a program where people can take this work and learn how to use it as a tool to help others. And I will also be writing follow-up. I don't know that they will be books, more so maybe material that people can use to really drill down into specific areas like divorce, like finance, like even weight loss, right? Because a lot of people who struggle with emotional eating, that is a huge sign of unfinished business. And I've had clients come to me that once they completed the unfinished business, the weight came right off.
Wow. Yeah, that's that mental pain, right? To get past, food is fuel, as they talk about. And,
but also belief systems. I had a client who,
exactly,
she promised her mother on her deathbed she would always keep her with her, and her mother was heavy. And she gained 65 pounds after the death of her mother and couldn't figure out how to take it off. It's really interesting. Really, really interesting.
It is.
How the psychology ends up in the physiology.
Yeah, and I know in this book you worked a lot on the science aspect. That's what I love, when spirituality and science shake hands and meet in the middle to talk about. It's not just an opinion based on a spiritual perspective, but it actually is supported by science. And I know that you did a lot of study, and even in the appendix, there's the Holmes and Ross stress scale. You actually added a lot of scientific, in the appendixes, you talk about, backed by science, which I really appreciated when I was reading through this book.
It's all backed, it's all scientifically supported, and all of my teachers are the leaders in these fields, and they are on all the fellowship papers. I mean, this is not an opinion at all.
No,
I mean, I have my feelings about it and my personal experience with it. And metaphor and anecdote, but no, this is all supported by science.
Yep, and that's what I love. That just shows the evolution of where we're going in our thought process, and looking at different things from different perspectives and different levels. And so I really appreciate.
And by the way, Mark,
well.
You mentioned Cindy, who gave such a beautiful testimony, but I also have a Harvard professor there. I also have a 7-time New York Times best-selling author there. I mean, I have some of the leaders. I have PhDs and these are real, really substantial people in these fields that said this works.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Well, and it's for you as you branch out with this, it's that Field of Dreams moment. If you build it, they will come. It starts as a vision. It starts as a download. The download bit then gets manifested into 8 steps. And next thing you know, you're doing workshops, you're on podcasts, you're doing, interviews. It is that Field of Dream moments where if you build it, they will come. So I'm looking forward to more work from you, Melanie, and
Mark,
love to have you back on the show and do a follow-up.
I would love to come.
We'd love to have you back. Where can people find you besides what we have posted on the Inspired Living page for social media? Where can people find you, and the best website to go to get this information or work with you directly?
So to work with me directly, you can go to workwithmelaniesmith.com. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I am Melanie Smith Official. On Facebook, I'm Melanie Smith. But if you want to buy the book, you can go to unfinishedbusinessthebook.com. And if you have the book, and if you want the downloads, you can go to unfinishedbusinessdownloads.com. So there you have that. And I look forward to hearing from anybody who has questions, that wants to understand more, or again, that wants to work one-on-one with me in the work, which I love. It's my calling.
You bet. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the many diamonds today on this episode. I really appreciate you. And I did have something I wanted to say before we close here. Let me see if I have the page. I had it marked, and then I closed the book of what I was going to say. And for the sake of time, oh my goodness, I had it at the very end of the book. Here we go. So we're going to close out, again, our special guest today, Melanie Smith. It says, may the accumulation and unfinished business be a thing of your past. May you move forward in your life knowing that no matter what the future holds, you will remain rooted, grounded, and empowered in the clean and nourished garden of your soul. Carry on, you beautiful gardeners and soldiers of the highest good. The light within me salutes the light within you, now and forever.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Mark. Have a beautiful day.
All right. You too. Take care. Thanks, listeners.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.